what kind of mistakes do you typically see from a RevOps function?
First one would be to just being a little bit short-sighted and focused only on the current quarter. A big blind spot is not being proactive and thinking 1 to 2 quarters out. The second piece in RevOps that I see some leaders struggle with is being able to take time to see the forest from the trees. It's really difficult because there's always initiatives that involve RevOps and can really take a team down for 1 to 2 weeks, even sometimes a month. And really stepping back to look at where's the market moving? How are new models coming about to incentivize right behaviors within go-to-market or RevOps and sales?
In your role as a RevOps leader, a persistent pain point gnaws at you, the struggle to pay proper attention to moments of success and failure that could significantly improve your operations. Among your daily operational whirlwind, these vital moments pass by unnoticed, causing you to lose valuable insights. Successes, which should serve as blueprints for replication, fade into the background, and failures, uncomfortable as they are, hold essential lessons for refinement and growth. Yet without careful examination, their potential to guide strategy is lost. How do you balance this rocking boat? Cody Guymon shares his playbook on exactly what moments you should be focused on as a RevOps leader to use your successes and failures as fuel for revenue growth. Cody is the COO and GTM of operations at Workato, where he specializes in driving revenue growth and implementing data-driven strategies. Cody is responsible for overseeing the centralized data team and ensuring that the organization has a standardized reporting hub for attribution and data integration. With his expertise in analyzing data, he helps identify areas of success and areas that need improvement, driving important insights and taking action to shape the future direction of the company. Listen through the full episode to hear how Cody drives revenue growth through using both successes and failures to his advantage.
I'm Kyle Coleman, sales pro turned SVP of marketing at Clary. Run Revenue is the show where revenue pros learn to stop revenue leak, achieve revenue precision, and grow their companies and careers.
This is the Run Revenue Show with Kyle Coleman.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Run Revenue Show. My name is Kyle Coleman. I am joined today by my friend Cody Guymon. Cody, how you doing today?
Doing great, Kyle. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack a handful of different topics around the revenue process and the types of moments that revenue leaders and revenue operations leaders should be focused on. Before we get into that, give us a little background of who you are, where you've been, and what you do now.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's Cody Guymon. I live out here in Eagle Mountain, Utah, kind of a little small town outside of Salt Lake, and I run go-to-market operations for Workato. My background a little bit is funky. I started off in consulting and healthcare, navigated my way into tech. I worked for a company called Vivint. It was more on the hardware side for solar and smart homes. Then I just finished up a 6-year run at Qualtrics where I had a fun ride there, a couple different exits, a buyout from SAP, and then broke off and went public and rode that journey for a little while. And then I've been at Workato almost about a year. Live in Utah, like I said, a wife and 3 kiddos. They are 9, 7, and 4, and we've got our hands full, so we're busy.
Beautiful, beautiful. So go-to-market operations, give us the 2-line sentence. What is go-to-market ops?
Yeah, think RevOps, but all things operations that hit revenue, or go-to-market. Sales ops, marketing ops, partner ops, CS ops. We handle all revenue data, deal desk, pricing, compensation, all the fun stuff. Where the rubber meets the road, that's kind of in the wheelhouse of where I cover and my team covers at Workato.
Is that a role that Workato had prior to your joining, or was that a role that you helped create based on the background that you had?
Yeah, helped create, actually. So at Qualtrics, I was the COO over global sales, and then at Workato now, COO over go-to-market operations. But yeah, it's kind of a fun process, crafting your own job description and putting it together and how you feel like the revenue world should come together on the operations side.
Yeah, no kidding. Right in the driver's seat, steering the wheel on your own career and what you get to focus on. And so your purview is way broader than this, but for the sake of this conversation, I think we're primarily going to focus on the revenue operations side of the house. But please feel free, because you probably can see how all of these different areas are interconnected. And so if you want to expand the purview, please feel free to do so. But from a RevOps perspective, first question I have for you is, what do people get wrong? What are metrics that they're focused on that aren't right? Or what are processes that are maybe not implemented correctly? What kind of mistakes do you typically see from a RevOps function?
Great question. I'm going to give you two. I think the first one would be to just being a little bit short-sighted and focused only on the current quarter. A big blind spot is not being proactive and thinking 1 to 2 quarters out. That's one area. The second piece in RevOps that I see some leaders struggle with is being able to take time to see the forest from the trees. It's really difficult because there's always buyers, there's always initiatives that involve RevOps and can really take a team down for 1 to 2 weeks, even sometimes a month. And really stepping back to look at where's the market moving? How are new models coming about to incentivize right behaviors within go-to-market or RevOps and sales? And really being able to see the forest from the trees. I think oftentimes operators will just go on to the next checklist box and not really take that time to look at the purview.
On that first point, too short-sighted. Why does this happen? Like, obviously, I know revenue teams are focused on making the quarter, but there should be a subset of people that are focused on the longer term, but obviously they're not. This is a problem that plagues so many companies. So why do you see this existing, and what can revenue teams do to kind of break out of that narrow focus and focus more long-term?
Some teams are just so busy, especially in these smaller companies. We talked about, pre-IPO companies, startups. You're just so busy with things that are coming at you and being super reactive. It takes intentionality to be proactive and think about multiple quarters out. And so tactically, something we put together is a pipeline pacing report, and it'll look at multiple quarters out, and it'll let you know if what we're doing today, let's say today's in Q1, are we setting ourselves up for success in Q3? And are we ahead or behind pace of where we should be, knowing what that target will be? So I think coming up with a really good annual plan that's robust and isn't changing every quarter, and then being able to metric against that plan multiple quarters before we actually hit the quarter is key. So that's just some tactical advice on how to do it, is grab a data scientist, grab someone with some predictive modeling experience in R or Python, and really just start to see where you need to be at any given point in time. I think that's a key one.
Take us inside this pipeline pacing report, because this is a concept that I've heard you talk about before, and it sounds amazing. It also sounds hard. So demystify it for us and talk to us about the actual mechanics of how this pacing report works and the value that you get out of it, the value that your CRO gets out of it. Talk to us about it.
For sure. So let's take, for example, right now we're in Q3. Okay. And I'm sure as you log into Clary, you'll see, okay, we've got 3 times pipeline coverage. We're good. We're good this quarter. But where do we need to be for Q4 at this point in time of the quarter? So specifically, September 5th, we are a month and a week into the quarter. What does our next quarter pipeline coverage need to be? 1.5x might be okay right now. We know our goal or target is 3 or 2, whatever your company has, but we actually know we don't need to be fully there yet if we've got 2 quarters of build left. And so it's all about finding where you need to be at any given day in a current quarter for the future one. So what does that look like? It is complex. It's a lot of stats. So what you do is you look at historical quarters where you've hit, and you're looking at where you were 90 days out from the future quarter, 180 days out from that next quarter or date that you're looking at. And it's looking at past to predict the future. And ultimately, you then take the outputs of that analysis and that report, and you plug it into a new report that gives you a pacing dashboard that shows if you're at 100% of pace, or you're at 110% of pace for 2 quarters out, or you might be at 70% of pace and we need to pick it up. But being able to have those dials earlier on allows you time to recover, really allows you time. Maybe we need to do a spiff right now. Maybe we need to do a certain marketing event to go drive pipeline for Q4, even though that's 2 quarters out from now. And so it's really just looking at a lot of data and using some predictive modeling to give you where you need to be, however many days out you might have that quarter start.
I absolutely love this. And so you need to know, the normal formula is, let's look at the amount of pipeline we have and the win rate of that pipeline. And okay, we know what our coverage needs to be. And that's not nearly scientific enough. We have so much more data now than we've ever had before that allow you to do those trend analyses to say, here's what our coverage is out quarter, or Q+2, Q+3, whatever it is. And then you made the key point there, Cody. It's not just reporting on it. It's okay, now we're making all of this reporting visible so that the right teams can go and action it. You mentioned spiffs, you mentioned marketing events, and I'm sure that you have this view broken down by geo or by segment or by industry or region, however your go-to-market team is structured. So you can be really, smart about where you're investing at different times and make sure that you're not throwing good money after bad, but instead you're directing budget, energy, resources toward the subset of your go-to-market that really needs it.
Yeah, exactly. We hold pipeline councils every 2 weeks where we
Nice.
grab all the sources together with each geo. And we're talking about, hey, looks like, marketing events is over 100% of pace right now. What's going well there? What's resonating? How are we optimizing that so well? Or, hey, partners is crushing it. What's the message that we're using with partners? And where's the traction coming from? Is it AWS? Is it GSIs? You're having a collaborative approach that then you can go optimize, right? And so it's really key. If you find out SDRs are just crushing it, what's that message that's resonating in the market? How do we bring that all the way through the funnel, to sales, to partners, to everybody, so that we know what's going to resonate and bring it all together? So it's all about action. I think back to your first question, like where do operators maybe sometimes go wrong? I talked about seeing the forest from the trees. Sometimes the tree is just putting that report out. It's like, hey, we need to know this report and we need to know where we're at, right? And you just get the report out. You hope someone's looking at it and you go. It's the extra stuff that's like seeing the forest from the trees. It's grabbing the pipeline councils together and say, what is the data telling us?
Right.
And how do we go change the future? If we're off 2 quarters, how do we go make it a win? How do we actually change the future by changing the present?
I love that. And maybe this is the value of go-to-market operations, an operations team that truly is including all the different members of the go-to-market organization. I'm curious, Cody, A, who runs that pipeline council? And then B, who is on the council? Who are the knights of the round table that you are having this meeting between?
Yeah, so multiple different ones. I have one at the global level that I'll run. And I, have each of the different heads of the department. So CMO for marketing, we head of partner ecosystems there, sales leadership. We're all there at the global level. But then regionally, on my team, I have a group of field ops directors that are in each geo, and they're pulling those same meetings together, but at the regional level. So in Europe, they're having a meeting and talking about what's going well in Europe from SDRs and marketing outbound and partners. So you're running those things at both the global level and then at the regional level, either every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks, just to give enough time for some things to be happening, maybe some new campaigns that are launched, and then really just trying to create a strategy from there.
Maybe this is a little bit too far in the weeds, but entertain me for a minute. Part of what I see break down in meetings like this is that you entertain too many rabbit holes and you end up getting just so far in the weeds where you're talking about something that ultimately is inconsequential. So how do you and your team, how do you own the conversation? How do you own the metrics that you're reporting on? How do you control the scope so that you don't end up with this scope creep where you end up having to answer and pull 100 new reports or data points or something like that? Like, how do you agree on the metrics that matter and the data that's important?
Super helpful. First off, I think it's important to have a centralized data team. We have a head of go-to-market data named Tyler Lawson at Workato. He joined me. We worked together at Qualtrics, and we both started Workato right around the same time. And we brought in all of the data into one spot where we have one source of truth. I think you've got to start there, because I think if everyone comes with their own report showing up, you can have 1 + 1 = 2.8 and start getting some things that don't really make sense. And so you have to have a standardized, I would say, reporting hub where everyone agrees upon attribution and everyone agrees about how the data is pulled together in one spot. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's just having a set of questions you're gonna drive the conversation with and just falling back on those. That's going to be key. And in taking time to review the data before the meeting. So if you just pull up a dashboard and you're in there trying to fly by the seat of your pants, you really don't know the way you're trying to figure it out on the go, you're wasting people's time. So at least just take 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. The dashboarding is actually pretty intuitive. So it'll show you where we're off pace, where we're above pace. So you really want to find out where are we doing good and what's working. How are we doing it good there? Like what SDRs, you're crushing it this month. What's resonating in the market? That's a good question to ask. And then where are we falling way behind? What's dragging our average down? And what's happening? Why isn't it as good? Is there seasonality there? Is it just that we don't know how to get revenue out of that pocket? We've got to figure it out. But I think avoiding kind of your middle area where we're like hitting target or doing, or slightly behind. Like I focus on ones that are crushing it and ones that are really falling behind and dragging down the average to see what's going on there. And then leave 10 minutes maybe for the middle at the end. Like any big learnings that we had since last month that's resonating. Like what should we be sharing with the rest of the org?
I love that. You look at who the superstars are so you can multiply their success. You look at where the laggards are so that you can really course correct.
Yes.
And then those are the two biggest levers that you have in all likelihood. And then the middle of the pack sort of stuff, you can optimize on the margins. I think that's a really sharp setup. So that makes a lot of sense as far as like pipeline pacing and that approach to running revenue in a way that is really prescribed. Like you shouldn't be surprised by outcomes, whether you're talking about current quarter, next quarter, Q+2, whatever it is, because you've been monitoring them every step of the way. You keep your finger really close to the pulse. Is that one of the main outcomes here? Is that you and your team and your executive team in particular, your board, feels like you have a lot better guidance for the business?
Absolutely. I think, especially pre-IPO companies.
Yeah.
You've got to get to a spot where you can be predictable. Every operator, every sales leader, every CFO should be asking themselves, if we went public tomorrow, could we set a beat and raise model for 4 quarters out? And like, if that scares you to death, there's going to be a lot of variability in the performance and the stock price. And so I think every operator needs to know where you are at a rolling 4 quarters in the future and be able to not have surprises. Like you said, be able to call your shot, know where you're going to be, course correct if you know you're behind, and be able to salvage a quarter and sometimes get it done when it might have been ugly or you had to, make some things happen intra-quarter. But yeah, the outcome is predictable, high performance growth.
Love it. Now, I can imagine some people saying, well, Cody, this all sounds great if we lived in a predictable world, but we live in a world full of apparently pandemics and, recessions and all the rest. So how does this process help you smooth out some of those, maybe not the extreme black swan events, but how does it help you smooth out some of the unpredictability in the macro that you can't control?
Yeah, that's a $1 million question right there. I love it. It gives you the best shot. Like we all couldn't have predicted the 2 year ago kind of tech turn that happened. I don't know that we would have said a day before it started to turn, like, I see this coming.
Yeah.
The key is just to be able to react quickly when change happens. And, if you have live reporting going on of win rates and you're seeing those go down or deal sizes maybe slightly coming down, and you can adjust your pacing report needed, like, hey, 3x isn't good enough anymore. We need 3.5 because we just hit last quarter barely, but we thought we were going to exceed. And it's because the environment's changed a bit. You can then adjust all your modeling moving forward. But, you're not going to be able to predict the future too much of like pandemics and crashes and things of that nature, but it gives you as good of a shot as you can to adjust on the fly.
I love that answer. Like, you're never going to have perfect information about the future. It's the future. We don't even have the perfect information about the past, for God's sake.
Right.
Like, it's just not going to happen. But I love that framing, giving yourself the best shot to know what's happening before it happens. And importantly, pay more attention perhaps to the leading indicators that you can extrapolate from, as opposed to waiting for outcomes and being like, shoot, we really missed on that one.
Yeah.
So what are some of those leading indicators that you're looking at as part of the Pipeline Council?
Yeah, I think, pipe build in dollars, I think is going to be key. Win rates, average deal sizes are going to be key, both on wins, but also on pipe created, right? If you see like wins are going to be lagging, you're going to be, 3 to 6 months out, depending on how long your deal cycle is. But if you're looking more upstream and you're looking at opportunities created, hey, our ops are going 10K higher than they have been in the past. This new selling methodology we rolled out and enabled the sales organ. This is really working. This is great. Like we're getting bigger deals. Like we factor that into the model. Our win rates are going up. Those type of things, I think, are what we key in on, the opportunity data.
And you mentioned a couple times you're looking at sourcing and attribution, which sounds like you've agreed to an attribution model, which is, 9/10 of the battle. So congratulations on that front. When you're looking at pipeline that's sourced by SDR or sourced by events or something like that, are you tracking those as separate funnels? So your win rate by SDR source pipeline or event source pipeline? How are you doing that?
Yeah, we're breaking that marketing bucket down into 4 different buckets underneath it, right? You'll have events, you'll have paid, you'll have SDRs, so on and so forth. So we're going to break each of them down as granular as possible. You don't need to go too far down the rabbit hole. Break it down with separate win rates that you're taking like a 4-quarter average on, and then you're running that to predict the future.
Yep. That's a must-do activity. And because it changes the conversation, like a lot of what we're talking about here, Cody, is the action that you're taking based on the information that you're learning. And so what a lot of executive teams will do is say, oh, well, we need to create more pipeline. An out quarter is looking a little soft, whatever it is. So let's go run an event and let's create 1,000 MQLs and then we'll be good to go. It's like, well, maybe. But what we really need to know is what is the pipeline impact of those events? And importantly, what is the win rate of the pipeline that we create from those events? And is that the right lever to pull? Is that the right way to allocate our resources? And it sounds like you've got the right sort of balance of detail by source or sub-source within each of your main buckets. And so is that the balance that you try and strike?
Yeah, that's the balance. And so I think you take those win rates by source, you look at where you're going to pump money into and how much it'll bring to be converted into expected revenue. So it's not just like pipeline and conversions, like what's the expected revenue we get? And does that close the gap? Yes or no? I think the next layer that a lot of really good operators are doing right now is adding, what did we pay to get that dollar of revenue?
Yep.
Because it's all an optimization game now. It's about Rule of 40, Rule of 50, Rule of 60, free cash flow margin. And so that the second half has been neglected for years prior that's coming into full view now is like, if we put $1 here, what are we getting back in each of the sources? And I know we can close the gap there, but it might be too expensive. Maybe we need to close the gap halfway with that channel and go to the cheaper resource and get half from the other channel. So it's about the cost game now too. So I think that's the other piece you layer on top of it is, what did it cost to generate that $1 of pipeline and $1 of won revenue?
I love that metric of expected revenue based on the sources and the win rates and the different funnels you're tracking. Like listeners, if you take nothing else away from this conversation, tracking that metric of expected revenue, that is going to get the attention of your executive team. That will get the attention of the board, of everybody across the team. Because a lot of times, especially marketing people, they fall victim to this fallacy where the revenue team needs to care about our metrics. It's not going to happen. And so if you can, marketers, convert the way that you're talking about your outcomes to expected revenue based on the actual data that you have about your different funnels, it's going to totally change the conversation and give you a different seat at the table.
Absolutely. 100%. And so I think getting to that converted revenue and then bring it to the board of what you paid to go get that revenue. What was the cost per dollar of revenue won? And what did we pay? Like, I think that's going to be key as you see these really good public companies have sales and marketing costs at 50% of revenue. How do we do that? We've got to be really efficient with our spend. And I think that's the really big piece that'll trend well with the board too.
Absolutely love that. Okay, stepping back, you mentioned also a lot of times the way that revenue leaders or go-to-market leaders, they don't see the forest through the trees. They're not thinking about new revenue models or new commission structures or new incentive plans. And one of the ones that I know you've called out in the past, and I think one that Workato is rolling out right now is consumption revenue. So first, for the listeners, explain what usage-based revenue or consumption revenue is, and then talk to us about how you're implementing that as a commission structure or incentive structure across the team.
Great. Yeah. So high level, usage-based revenue or consumption-based revenue really is focused on the customer using the product. And whatever that might be, for us, we price in tasks, which are part of we call recipes, workflows. And so whenever customers are using our product and using what we price against, that's driving consumption. That's the behavior we want. Them to be successful, us to be successful, all good. Whereas sometimes you'll see revenue models that might be just maybe it's seat-based. And it doesn't matter how much is consumed or not consumed, it's just a person in the chair, right? Versus consumption is actually like utilizing the product for what it's intended to be.
Yep.
And so I think there's a pretty big movement right now around moving towards consumption-based pricing models and consumption-based go-to-market compensation. So, basically paying reps when product is utilized and used versus you might have somebody sold a $500,000 deal and we're super excited. We paid up front on it. There's a lot of money, and then throw it over the fence to CS to hopefully get something going.
Yeah.
And then nothing gets utilized, or 20% of it gets utilized, and then we have a big downgrade, right? It's mitigating that behavior and it's all about being predictable, right, Kyle? Like we talked about, when you're a public company, you don't want to see these huge ebbs and flows and spikes of attrition or spikes of downgrades and consumption. So going to a consumption-based model where you're fully focused, your whole go-to-market is around getting the customer successful and utilizing the product everywhere. It's a really good focus to have for all of the different orgs.
And so we'll get into more about how you've implemented this at Workato, but do you have different revenue models at Workato? Do you have seat-based as well as usage-based, or have you gone completely usage-based?
Usage-based, yeah. There's no seat-based piece. And we're in the process of moving towards full consumption in February at the start of our next fiscal. So we're not there yet. I think you can see the companies with the highest revenue multiples on the public market have moved fully there. Think about Mongo and
Confluent.
AWS and Confluent and Datadog, and all of these great companies Snowflake have moved towards full consumption. And we're just kind of used to that now. And I think that that's the way of the future. You see the reason why they have the highest multiples on the public market, because that they found this is an efficient way to actually spend money, is to get people using the product. Good NRR driving, good retention rate. You don't have to worry about overselling up front. It really aligns go-to-market in a good way. And so we're on that journey. And I think a lot of companies this year are really trying to figure out that journey. And so, one model for pricing is what we're moving towards as well. And sales comp, SDRs, CSMs, everybody aligned on customer outcomes, I think is key.
What a novel concept, Cody. You optimize your go-to-market for what the buyer wants. This is unheard of. It's unbelievable. In all seriousness, it's such a better, or it's a different way of thinking about things. And it's a way that, as you've mentioned multiple times, but I want to make sure we're emphasizing this, aligning incentives, not just when people talk about this, they're normally thinking about internal incentives. Well, how do we make sure that our account execs are incentivized the same way as our CSMs? Okay, cool. What you're talking about is aligning incentives between the buyer and the seller. And that is a fundamentally different way of approaching your go-to-market. And so when you started at Workato a year ago, was this already in motion, in flight, or is this something that you helped usher in?
I wouldn't even give myself credit for bringing this one in. I think that it's observing. It's taking that time to observe. What are these great companies doing? How are they growing at such a high growth rate and efficient? And you start to see things in common, right? You start to see, we had our head of enterprise came from Mongo. So what are MongoDB doing? How are they doing this? What's different? And that's where we started talking about consumption and usage-based pricing and those types of strategies. So we started just digging around a little bit, trying to find out. And I think as we've asked a lot of questions, I've found that other operators, other COOs are doing the same thing. They're kind of moving towards this, but there's no exact playbook.
Right.
We're relying on what went well at companies like Mongo or Snowflake or AWS. What went bad? Like, what would you undo if you could? And it's a new way of thinking. There's a lot of change with that. That's going to, change management's going to be key. So we got to be thoughtful about how we go there. And maybe we don't go 100% in year one. Maybe we go 80% of the way there in year one and we get the other 20 later. I mean, it's a whole company move. If you think about from just even the product standpoint, product now needs to build a product that shows usage clearly to the customers and our internal team. So we know where we're trending with the customer, how much of against contracted they've utilized. If they're over, how do we handle if they're over already? Do we do monthly billing? Do we just automatically do that? Do you do a true up every quarter? I mean, there's so many pieces that come together. Even how do you define ARR? Sometimes can change. I've heard of some companies doing a consumption run rate where they take the last trailing 3 quarters of consumption, multiply it by 4, and that's the consumption run rate that goes up or down versus ARR. There's a lot of pieces that come into this puzzle that just need to be thoughtfully, approached.
And one of the main pieces that you just mentioned, Cody, is that when you're running this kind of new revenue model, and especially this consumption one, a lot of the revenue critical data that you need is not in your CRM. You're capturing it in your product usage database, you're capturing it in whatever external data warehouse you have or whatever it may be. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Clary now has the capability of ingesting those different data sources, whether this consumption data lives in Snowflake or Postgres or SQL Server, wherever, we can pull it all in and then add it right there in context so you need it so that you can forecast properly. And this is especially true, not just for folks that run consumption models only, but for people that are running consumption models in parallel with seat-based models or opportunity-based models. Having all of your forecasting information in a single place is critical for revenue leaders. So shameless plug over, moving back to you.
It changes the way you forecast.
Totally.
Completely changes the game because you're not forecasting on hopeful consumption that could happen in the future. You're looking at actuals and extrapolating into the future. And so piping that into the opportunity grid as well for each opportunity that you know where they're at currently versus contracted, where their run rate's looking like, when we anticipate the next opportunity that's going to pop up. Like there's a lot of pieces to it now when you're doing this that you have to have in a single dashboard, single place.
You're exactly right. And so how do you incentivize reps in this consumption model? I can imagine a lot of revenue leaders that are used to a more traditional way of compensating reps are like, if they're not actually buying something up front and you just landed a contract that says they might use your product at some point, how do you actually commission or compensate reps? What's been your approach to that?
Yeah, we're working through quite a variety of them right now. There's a lot of ways you can do this, and we haven't landed on one yet. So I'll keep you posted, but there's a lot of things out there, right? You can do net quotas. You can do, we pay, 60% of the commission up front, and then we give the other 40% as soon as they go live, or as soon as they hit a certain milestone of growing live. The key here is that, when you step back and look at the strategy of the business and why this is happening, it's aligning the outcomes of the customers with what we want to do at Workato. And so if we can get reps on board with, hey, that really matters. Once you get people successful and you have a sticky product that works well, which my plug for Workato is that it is, and it's very good, is you just see usage take off.
Sure.
So that's the upside, is like, go get people using it and focused on building and then watch it scale. And that's the big payoff after you get people really using your product. And so, much like Claire, you get in the door, you get people using it, they love the product, and then everyone wants it. You start getting CS that wants it and marketing people that want it. You start with sales or whatever it might be. If you have a rep that's really focused on that land with the vision of the expand, it's a little slower up front. Your deal size might be slightly smaller when you land, but look at the upside of everyone around you is focused on that customer being successful.
I love that. And I have to imagine it helps with the monthly retention, your net dollar retention, you mitigating churn, all those types of things, because your customers are actually using the product. Again, a novel concept here for us in software sales.
Yeah.
Okay. So Cody, we are amazingly already up against the clock here. So I have one last question for you. I did not prep you for this. It's a surprise, which is a question I ask every guest. What's a book that you would recommend to revenue leaders or to operators? What's a book that's maybe been impactful for you?
I think it's a soft skill book, which is interesting. So How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Dale Carnegie.
There you go. That would be my one. I think if you really want to drive change and not be like an ivory tower ops leader, if you really want to drive change, it's about influencing people. And so I think it's change management, about getting ideas across the finish line. So that would be my book.
Love that. Okay. Where can people go to find out more about you? Where can people go to find out more about Workato?
Yeah, go to workato.com. It's work and then ato.com to find out about Workato. It's integrations and automations platform company with AI. Super exciting. We just had our Automate event last week. So we had our big user conference, really, really exciting on what we're doing with AI as well. Myself, Cody Guymon, Guymon. Find me on LinkedIn and I'll connect with you there and then reach out. I check my messages usually once a week. So if I don't get back to you quickly, know that I'll get there eventually.
Good man, Cody. Thank you so much for the time. Cody Guymon, he leads up go-to-market operations at Workato. Can't thank you enough. This was absolutely awesome. I've got reams of notes. So thank you all, everybody, for tuning in. That is a wrap for this episode of the Run Revenue Show. As always, the playbooks, the information, everything you need is in the show notes, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks, Kyle.
Don't let what you heard today go to waste. Take 2 minutes to download today's checklist to get your priorities in line for the week. You can find that linked in our show notes. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. We'll be back next Monday with more to help you win your week.